So in this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to us, the judges. So make sure that everybody knows who you are and who we are supposed to be before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes on all three accounts. I've got a timer, so when we start, I'll get that going and I'll give you a 2-minute warning if we need to as we get towards the end. During this time, you will not be interrupted, but when you're finished, we will get to ask you questions in character. So I've read that you've assigned to us the role of board of directors. So we will stay as members of the board and ask you questions in that role. After the Q&A, we'll stop, we'll all take a deep breath, and we'll stop the role playing, and we can give you some feedback. You can ask us questions if you like, and we can prepare you for tomorrow.
Okay, good afternoon, ExxonMobil Board of Directors. Our team at RDS Consulting is so excited to be here today to present to you our findings surrounding your company's sustainable investment strategy. Since being hired several months ago, we've conducted a detailed analysis of your company's current position. From this, we have identified some recommendations that will best equip you for future success in our changing world. But before we dive into our presentation, I want to take a moment to briefly introduce our team. My name is Tatum, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Chase, Sabrina, and Grace.
Thank you, Tatum. So first, just a quick roadmap of our presentation. We're going to first discuss the implications of the climate change as well as the effect on ExxonMobil's business. Then we're going to talk about a proposed solution as well as the financial, ethical, and legal implications of it. And finally, after concluding, we're going to open the floor to questions from you all.
Thanks, Chase. So to begin to plan for the future, we must look where things are headed. And the reality is that they aren't headed in the right direction. Climate change is no longer merely a scientific phenomenon, but a social and economic problem. Climate change is on track to disrupt life as we know it. Unless actions are taken to reduce global warming, greater temperatures will cause forced relocation of entire towns, spark faster spread of disease, and reduce our capacity to work. It'll also bring dire economic consequences. Shrinking productivity of harvest and reduced supplies of fresh water will cause wars over resource access, and adapting coastal regions to rising sea levels will result in high costs. Furthermore, the rising frequency of extreme meteorological phenomena will cause poverty, as entire regions of our world are devastated, one after the other. As such, you, ExxonMobil, as one of the world's largest energy providers and chemical manufacturers, bear a particular responsibility to address climate change in your own operations. But I don't need to remind you of this. Your own guiding principle is to protect tomorrow today. Energy production and its products in their current form of petroleum and natural gas are inherently harmful to the environment. Even when properly produced, they have the effect of releasing high levels of carbon emissions into the atmosphere, which contributes to global warming exponentially. And when energy production goes wrong, the environmental consequences are even more dire. Oil spills have effects on human communities, wildlife, and land for decades. Take, for instance, your 1989 Valdez oil spill. 30 years later, local populations of killer whales and seabirds in the Prince William Sound have still not fully recovered. Scientists in recent times have discovered pockets of oil buried 4 to 8 inches under sand and gravel. Thus, the responsibility lies on you to make sure that your operations provide benefit, not harm, to the society that you serve. The welfare of future generations is at stake.
Now, Tatum has just identified some key ethical issues regarding your crucial role in climate change and sustainability. That said, however, not only for ethical reasons, but also to maintain stakeholder value over the long run, you need to make changes to adapt to global energy trends. Long-term, ExxonMobil's operation in oil and natural gas are actually self-defeating. If you don't adapt now, ExxonMobil won't be viable in the second half of the century. At the current rate of consumption, estimated oil reserves will run out in 47 years. The transportation industry is quickly adapting to the global shift as well. Deloitte forecasts that China is estimated to achieve a domestic market share of 48% by 2030, 27% in the US, and 42% market share in Europe. This growth in electric powered transportation will correspond to a rise in electric charging stations and national policy shifts to green energy. We've already seen this in action under the Biden presidency. 2 weeks after being sworn in, they announced plans to switch the entire federal fleet to all electric vehicles. Further proof is in the graph. Integrated oil companies are facing high pressure from investors and regulators to increase efforts towards environmental sustainability. Climate change and climate threats pose a very real danger to the global community. ExxonMobil is well equipped to take initiative and lead efforts for the oil and petroleum industry to be more mindful of how business activities create environmental harm that will affect generations to come. This graphic shown on Investor Day that shows that by 2040, the demand for low carbon energy sources will more than double. As the world moves towards renewable energy, we need to position ourselves to capture market opportunities. According to a McKinsey report from this February, after more than 30 years of stable growth of more than 1% per year, oil demand growth is going to slow down in the late 2020s and actually peaks in 2029. Various drivers could actually cause the peak to occur 6 to 10 years earlier. Your competitors have already started to act on this looming fact. For example, BP announced plans to be net zero emissions by 2050. By 2030, they will have cut oil and gas outputs by 40%. This equates to a $5 billion a year investment to low carbon projects. This will result in a 10% of hydrogen share in core markets by 2030, and also 20% of the biojet market share. By 2030, they also plan to have a capacity of 50 gigawatts in developed renewable energy. Another major competitor, Shell, is planning to increase spending on low carbon energy to make up 25% of overall capital expenditure by 2025. This equates to a $5 to $6 billion a year investment. The numbers are clear. Your competitors have recognized the need to change is urgent. For you to continue to power progress around the world, you need to act now before it gets extremely costly to do so and you lose your competitive edge.
Our solution is based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals surrounding affordable and clean energy, as well as industry innovation and infrastructure. Due to the urgency of the need to transition to renewable energy, you must create a revenue-generating renewable sector composed of renewable energy generation and investments in sustainable technology, such as carbon capture and storage. This change will increase your environmental sustainability and position the company as a global leader in sustainable practices. Now we will go into greater detail about our proposed solutions. The first part of our solution focuses on generating renewable energy. When looking at the renewable energy market as a whole, the International Energy Agency recently published a report forecasting an increase in energy capacity additions in 2021 for both the United States and China. Exacerbating challenges such as supply chain disruptions and operational delays have increased financing and project development challenges in renewable energy. Construction delays due to the pandemic are expected to impact various European utility-scale projects. However, capacity additions are expected to return to normal levels by the end of 2021. The International Energy Agency forecast expects to add approximately 200 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, and the commission of 2 mega hydropower projects in China in 2021 supports the overall rebound of renewable energy sources. Now I'll pass it on to my colleague Chase, who will discuss how your company can invest in renewable energy.
Thank you very much, Grace. So ExxonMobil is able to invest in renewable energy in really 3 easy steps. So the first part is leveraging ExxonMobil's existing strengths in order to make this possible. So the biggest one we're talking about is actually ExxonMobil's scale. As a company, ExxonMobil is a global operation. Therefore, they're able to actually have a diversified energy portfolio, which is actually our second point. And that basically means that, in the center of the United States, where there's a lot of sun, they can have really efficient solar farms. However, they also have a bunch of off-seas drilling, which can also lead the way to, offshore wind turbines, which is another really sustainable form of energy production. And by doing that, it basically is a hedge against sort of climatic events or other unexpected occurrences that could damage potentially one aspect of renewable energy. For example, if a hurricane hurt, overseas wind farms, but it would be okay because there's still, solar farms in the central United States. And the last part of our renewable energy goal is actually a target. So we're saying that ExxonMobil should set to achieve a 50 gigawatt capacity by 2035. This number is actually based off of the number that BP set, and we picked that number because it will allow ExxonMobil to remain competitive in the renewable energy market and make an extremely large difference. So I know the next question to ask is actually how much energy is 50 gigawatts of energy? So just for perspective on 50 gigawatts of energy, it's around 15 million homes. And that's actually around roughly 10% of all homes in the United States that could be powered with this plan through renewable energy. Additionally, we mentioned how electric cars and charging and batteries are going to be a big emerging sector in the coming years. So a Tesla with a 100 kilowatt battery, it would be around 10,000 Tesla chargers. And finally, on a more fun note, if anyone's a Back to the Future fan, it takes around 1.21 gigawatts of electricity to go back in time, which would equate to around 41.32 time traveling DeLoreans. So the next part of this is actually looking at sustainable technology investments. So we want to talk about sustainable technology as an emerging business sector. You can see hundreds, if not thousands, of clean tech startups emerging on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis. And we see these as a huge opportunity for future investment. And this really comes with the idea that ExxonMobil can be a leader in some of these new, exciting, emerging technologies, such as battery production, electrification of grids, heating and cooling systems, a whole variety of new, exciting products. And by investing early on through partnerships, acquisitions, talent acquisitions, et cetera, it will allow ExxonMobil to make a bigger impact in the long run. So I'm now going to turn it over to Sabrina to actually talk about some specific investment opportunities we see.
Thanks, Chase. We see investment opportunities both internal and external. First, we'll look at the internal technology investments to refine your current operations. Currently, most sustainability efforts at ExxonMobil focus on plastic waste management and the chemical operations. Taking a closer look at reducing waste in the upstream and downstream operations are just as important. Beginning with upstream activities, drilling produces waste oil. Rather than disposing of the contaminated oil, we propose a cost-cutting, revenue-generating solution. Investing in less capital-intensive machinery, such as microrefineries, to recycle waste oil would require, yes, an initial investment, but recycling the oil would actually give it a second life as usable diesel fuel. This would also add an additional source of revenue. These microrefineries are fully automated and require low operating costs. This can reduce the transportation costs and environmental risk of disposal. There's also a high potential for waste management in the downstream sector. For example, sulfur produced by the heating process can actually be exported as a raw material. Metals in the catalyst used in the heating process can be recovered and recycled. By doing a cost-benefit analysis for your operations, ExxonMobil can take a systematic approach to reducing waste and thus reducing disposal costs and also raw materials costs. Thirdly, investing in contemporary oil field equipment is crucial to preventing water and land contamination. This is due to leakage from storage and pipelines. Toxic waste can make its way to nearby drinking sources, farmland, and cattle ranches. ExxonMobil should also invest in computational pipeline monitoring, CPMs, so that they can actively monitor pipelines and leaks. According to a leak detection study by North Dakota, CPMs can provide a 96% reduction in total spill volume and would reduce the time to detect to less than 2 hours. So far, we've outlined for you the internal solutions to better increase your sustainability efforts. Externally, ExxonMobil should pursue emerging technologies such as energy grid optimization, electric batteries and charging, and sustainable software. This investment can be made through a variety of corporate acquisitions, partnerships, and talent acquisition. The bottom line is that refining your current operations and both looking for external opportunities will increase sustainability and reduce environmental harm and disposal and materials costs for the company. Investing into growing energy solutions will bolster your portfolio and prepare you for a changing market.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. So now we want to talk about why this specific strategy is good for ExxonMobil. So first, we want to remind everyone of ExxonMobil's mission statement of protecting tomorrow today. So as climate change is an ethical threat, it's going to affect thousands, millions, billions of people worldwide. So by investing in renewable technology, it starts to create the transition to a more sustainable future, and it mitigates this future risk of climate change, protecting millions of people. Additionally, it also protects ExxonMobil from future financial distress, whether it's from declining oil profits or lawsuits as a result of oil spills. It really helps ExxonMobil bolster its financial stability in the long run. And finally, it really establishes ExxonMobil as a leader in the renewable industry. And this kind of comes from both generating the electricity, but also investing in these slightly more niche kind of products that will become the innovations of the future. And ExxonMobil should have a hand in developing those to their full potential.
Thanks, Trace, for providing an overview of why this strategy makes sense for ExxonMobil. In order to support our recommendations for investing in renewable energy and sustainable technology and to execute this plan, your company should pursue a hybrid model of a combination of joint ventures, acquisitions, and talent acquisitions. This strategy is dependent on the solution, the industry and technology available, and capital required. However, we have no concerns about the financial feasibility of our implementation. As our plan is extremely flexible, we can adapt to meet any unexpected financial changes. In addition, if raising capital is needed to fund investments in renewable energy and technology, your company's strong financial position allows for this occur. For instance, your company's debt to equity ratio is 50.67% and your interest coverage ratio is 14.3. This interest coverage ratio demonstrates your company's ability to service its debt and capability to meet its interest obligations from operating earnings. In addition, your company has a history of large capital expenditures. As your company shifts to renewable energy, reductions in oil related to capital expenditures can be made in order to fund the program. In addition to the financial considerations of our recommendations are the legal implications. Investing in renewable energy and sustainable technology reduces the cost from potential legislation. For instance, the Paris Climate Agreement doesn't account for Scope 3 emissions, which account for the majority of ExxonMobil's emissions. In addition, it reduces the risk of financial distress because it hedges against the effect of climate change on your company's oil portfolio. Another legal implication is that this strategy reduces the risk of potential lawsuits from environmental damages. Lawsuits can drain a company's finances, energies, and resources, in addition to damaging a company's reputation. Now I'll turn it over to Tatum, who will discuss the feasibility of our proposed solution.
Thanks, Grace. So as Grace has pointed out, this solution makes sense for your company both financially and legally, but it also makes sense because it plays off of your current competitive advantages to maximize impact. Specifically, our solution is tailored to benefit from ExxonMobil's scale, integration, and functional excellence. First, as you implement this solution, you have the advantage of ExxonMobil's scale. Your current size of about 74,000 employees operating across 6 continents facilitates broad deployment of expertise, cost efficiencies, and operational learnings, while also enabling preferred partnership opportunities due to ExxonMobil's expansive market access. Second, you will also have the advantage of ExxonMobil's integration. The shared management of ExxonMobil's 3 main business divisions, upstream, downstream, and chemical, allows for security of feed supply and cost benefits, including sharing of support and facility infrastructure. This will allow all of ExxonMobil to benefit from investment into sustainable energy, and progress will not be segmented. Finally, your established functional excellence will also aid in the implementation of our solution. You have a long and successful history of operating complex global businesses. This has resulted in the development of deep knowledge in critical disciplines and industry-leading execution capabilities. This expertise will assist you in implementing our proposed 2-pronged approach with efficiency and ease.
To demonstrate Tatum's point of the feasibility of this solution, this case study of ExxonMobil's investment in carbon capture and storage demonstrates the capability of your company to be a leader in emission-reducing technologies. As a leader in carbon capture and storage, your company was one of the first to invest in this technology over 30 years ago, and the first to capture more than 120 million tons of CO2, which is equivalent of the annual emissions of about 25 million cars. CO2 that would have otherwise been released into the atmosphere has been injected into the earth for secure and permanent storage. In addition, in early February of this year, your company announced a carbon capture business unit called ExxonMobil Low Carbon Solutions. With robust partnerships across industry, academia, and government, your company is advancing carbon capture technologies to reduce its costs and increase scalability on a global scale.
Thank you, Grace. But we also want to emphasize that carbon capture and storage is only one solution for ExxonMobil, and the impact of carbon capture will be limited just to the scale and capabilities of this technology. So while we use carbon capture and storage as a case study for how ExxonMobil is excellent at developing and promoting new sustainable technology, it also underlies our main point that they need to invest in more of it in order to make a broader impact worldwide. And it also reiterates the fact that by doing so, not only will it help business, but will establish ExxonMobil as a leader in sustainability. So just to wrap up as a whole, we really want to reiterate that climate change is an ethical issue that is going to affect the entire globe. And ExxonMobil, as an organization focused in fossil fuels, needs to create a renewable energy and technology sector, as well as investing in sustainable development. And in doing so, ExxonMobil can continue to be a leader while enhancing their business model, both in domestically and internationally. And just to summarize all together, we really started with the idea that ExxonMobil's motto is protecting tomorrow today. And we hope that you will adopt our solution in order to live up to this promise and protect future generations to come. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us. We are now open to any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much. I'm a little concerned about people. And what I mean by that is we have our existing workforce, 47,000 people around the world. What's going to happen to them? And then during the transition to the new technologies, without our oil and gas, vaccines would not have been able to reach all of the people that need to get vaccinated against the pandemic. What do we do in these times of transition to protect people from loss of jobs and income to saving their lives?
Thank you very much. That's a wonderful question. So in terms of loss in jobs and income, sustainable development, specifically in solar and wind, it creates thousands of jobs. So the plan there would be to transition the people who are working in oil or natural gas to those sustainable careers, which is beneficial not only because it makes a ton of new high-paying jobs, but also better for their health. They're no longer exposed to chemicals or particulate matter. They're just being able to operate on new sustainable technology that is better for them and better for the environment. And in terms of transition, that's the reason we kind of set the renewable energy transition plan out to 2035, is because it allows the slow development of renewable energy. So we're not going to be cutting off all energy supply from oil immediately. So it allows that transition to be gradual in order to make sure that energy supply still meets what we need today. So we wouldn't anticipate any sort of lagging effects in, in this case, vaccine shipments.
Gail?
I had a little bit a hard time following what your solutions are. So they're already doing carbon storage and they should do more of it. They should invest in smaller companies or other companies and other technologies. Plus they have a staff of across various continents of very knowledgeable staff. I had a very hard time getting, what are you talking, are you talking about new technologies of so many billions of dollars, acquisitions? Give me an example of what kind of a company they would acquire. It seemed very general to me, and I was having a hard time following what your specific solutions are and the cost of those solutions. A lot of you were reading stuff off the grid that you didn't put in slides. So on your solutions, what does Exxon need to spend for your solution? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And you have it divvied up between acquisitions and new technologies?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I can get the answer started. So we were taking a two-pronged approach to providing a solution. One was investing in renewable energy, and the second, investing in sustainable technologies such as carbon capture. And because we took this approach because it's unrealistic to expect ExxonMobil to go completely green overnight. And so
Right.
acquiring companies will allow them to speed up this process. For example, there's a company called Carbon Engineering, and they're at the forefront of carbon capture. So a possible partnership or acquisition, something that adds value to the business, is something that they could possibly further invest.
And that one, the one you mentioned, carbon capture, is at the forefront, you said?
Yes, their company is called Carbon Engineering.
And then also to go off that in terms of total costs, we do want to reiterate that ExxonMobil does have very strong financials at this moment. So they have, besides that, they have a lot of extra cash on hand. They do have the capability to take out a level of debt and then pay off that interest based on their current financial state. So we don't want to put an exact number on it. BP is expected to spend somewhere between $5 and $6 billion a year, but their target date's also a little bit farther forward. So depending on when we want to hit that 50 gigawatt capacity for generation, or depending on the exact details of the merger acquisitions or partnerships, those could depend. But I also want to reiterate, part of the reason why we're also emphasizing the investment in renewable technology or sustainable technology is to lower those costs in the long run. So if there's a new company that comes out as a startup that says, here's the best way that we can, create wind energy, or here's a new type of solar panel, ExxonMobil can invest in that company and then utilize that technology to generate more electricity. So even though not all the companies that we would plan to invest in will be generating, green energy, that definitely is an aspect that we would be looking towards in an effort to reduce costs in the long run.
Okay, but if BP is, even though they're doing it over a longer time because their focus is 2050 and you're suggesting Exxon do 2035, then I would still expect you to be proposing or saying that it could be at least in this range. Maybe it's 2 to 3 billion if BP's 5 to 6. I need to focus on what our costs are going to be. Like, in fact, in carbon storage, do that on their own? Because or is that was that through acquisition?
Yeah, I can take that. So carbon capture through ExxonMobil is currently being done in-house. And
Right.
Like we mentioned in the presentation, you guys have been doing this for over 30 years. And this is an example of how successful you can be if you put in the investments of time and money. However, we would also like to note that carbon capture is not sustainable in the long run due to the fact that right now, a lot of the incentive to do carbon capture has been fueled by tax incentives offered by the government. However, these incentives only last 12 years from the start of the installation of the equipment, and the tax incentives are expected to end in 2026.
I think one of the areas that's really kind of driving your proposal is what could be called reputation risk. And one of your slides had to do with the competitors, which are ahead: British Petroleum, BP, and Shell. Those are both also international firms. But I was a little lost in that particular slide because I think those were based on projections, not actual performance by those two companies. Can you clarify that?
Yes, we can. So a lot of the big oil and gas companies are recently starting to announce their plans for more sustainability, hence why we are unable to find similar competitors that are already doing a lot of work in sustainability and reducing carbon emissions. However, like you said, there is a reputation risk in the fact that if ExxonMobil does not also announced their plans to cut emissions and increase sustainability, we are at the risk of losing investors. And we are at the risk of falling behind in comparison to BP and Shell because of the fact that green energy is expected to take up 44% of energy sector as a whole. So we need to catch up and start our work now.
So it's based on projections. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it is based on projections, but the truth of the matter is BP announced their energy plan 5 years ago. So that means ExxonMobil is 5 years later in terms of adopting renewable energy and kind of getting off the ground with this kind of plan, especially, mobilizing such a large organization. So even though there's still projections, ExxonMobil is already at a disadvantage because BP has 5 years in order to capture as much market opportunity in renewable energy and clean technologies as they can that ExxonMobil has already lost. So the faster ExxonMobil creates this investment and enact the plan that we propose, the less market losses they will lose out to BP and Shell, who've already started to take advantage of the changing renewable market.
Okay. You're aware, of course, that we're trying to reduce carbon emissions. We're trying to be more fuel efficient, actually using carbon as a power generation, and that we've invested $10 billion in the last 2 decades towards really enhancing what we're good at, which frankly is oil and gas. In some cases, it's better to leave people who are good at wind energy and electric energy, let them do their job, and really for us to do our job. How much, if we were to take your recommendations and make the transition into so-called renewable energy, how much of our market would you be asking us to, in effect, leave, or from a positive standpoint, move into those particular industries?
So I can start off. I would say you're definitely correct in being skeptical about the transitioning from what has already been very established, oil and gas, into renewable energy. And you'd have to give up some of the market in oil and gas, which the company already has. So I would say that with any new investment, you first test it out and you evaluate the risk and see what that investment will do. And so from our proposal, I would recommend maybe a small investment, so maybe around 5%, and then to see how that transition period goes.
Can I ask, should we just concede the market to the other oil and gas companies and go into the battery and storage business?
We're not proposing that you take a drastic approach as Shell or BP in reducing your oil and gas operations. However, it is important to recognize that oil and gas is a non-renewable resource, hence the fact that it is a cash cow. But that cash cow is going to run out in, like I said, the next 47 years is when the oil reserves are expected to run out. So at that point, we would have to do some more drilling, and that would cause further environmental harm. So we are recognizing that oil and gas is a cash cow in the industry, but we also recognize that renewable energy is a start. It's a quickly growing sector, and we are thinking the very long run for ExxonMobil is that we should have the cash cow as the basis, but also be aware of the fact that there are other sectors that are high growing and will experience fast growth because the oil and gas industry is likely to decrease in the coming decades.
And also, in terms of whether you're already behind in reference to Shell and BP, even though BP announced their plans 5 years ago, the renewable energy sector is still rapidly growing. So I think it is important to invest in batteries and charging, so specifically because they're also rapidly growing and could give you a competitive advantage in that field. But I think the main core of what ExxonMobil is really good at is creating energy. And I think they should focus on creating renewable energy because that is what ExxonMobil has excelled at for the past, many years.
Yeah, we have time for one more question. Gail?
Yeah, I just wanted to, because we did that financial page really fast. Were you proposing like a reduction in dividends, or did I read that wrong?
We were not proposing a reduction in dividends.
We're not.
No.
Oh, okay. I just read it wrong. It just was so fast. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Financial page, that was the past 3 years of financial statements for ExxonMobil. So there could have been
Oh, that was just the
Use-
payment of dividends. Okay, got it.
David, last question to you.
I think it's probably easier for us to create a partnership with a company that may be already doing what you're suggesting. And that partnership can, maybe we could, buy a stock ownership in that company. We can invest in that company rather than having to kind of reinvent the wheel by doing all these operations by ourselves. And that's an alternative source, I think, that might be mentioned in your presentation. Because we are so huge that to be asking us to all of a sudden, even though to a small degree, shift into another energy sector, we're just better off doing that in a partnership. Also, a follow-up to Barney's comment, there's a misconception about moving to wind energy and creates jobs and all that, because there is very, very little maintenance involved on a windmill. And so that you're maybe creating jobs in the short term, but overall, you're losing jobs in the long term.
You had one particular slide that I thought was fabulous, and I would never be able to create it. It was the one where the amount of oil and gas was declining, and it was this clock that was counting down. Terrified me. I thought, wow, first of all, what a message to send to a board of directors about their declining resources, and second, what a terrific way to present it. So nicely done. Gail, some feedback for the team?
Thank you.
Sure. I thought everybody's presentation skills were good. I think you had a lot of information that we didn't see in the slides because you were able to answer the questions, and maybe a little bit more of what you had on the side, make it into the slides that would be impactful, like things that I thought were impactful, that we're still living with problems from Valdez, that we only have 47 years of reserves left. But I have to tell you, the one that got my attention most, and I think that would get Exxon's board's attention, is the fact that that BP announced their plans 5 years ago, and so Exxon's already behind. Someone like Exxon never wants to be behind. So I think that kind of a statement, it's a simple statement, I know, but it's so impactful to get people's attention. So sometimes not the most complicated might be the most impactful and get people's attention to listen to the rest of the story. The carbon capture that they've already been involved in, I thought was good. The fact that you brought up, I had no idea those tax incentives run out in 2026. And so there are some real things that we have to consider as Exxon to move. We don't want to be behind the competition. We've got tax incentives that are disappearing. We have limited reserves. Again, those aren't rocket science concepts, but they capture your attention to, yes, we do need to take action. So maybe some of the simpler stuff, gets in a slide that catches somebody's attention as a call to action, so to speak.
David, feedback?
Overall, I thought the presentation was very good. Sometimes it's good maybe to slow down when you're talking. I'm of the older generation and may not catch every word that you're talking about. As was mentioned in an earlier presentation, I think the key is to listen to the questions that are being asked. And that kind of gives you an idea of the strengths and weaknesses of your presentation. In other words, the quality of the presentation. I think that's important. The questions again, there was a lot of material that was covered, but like another judge, I wish that there was more zeroing in on some concrete examples. And I was led to believe that the board is, that you're bringing up the concept, which is good, but then you're asking the board to go out and do the research. And that's part of a recommendation. That's the job of Robert Day Consulting, to bring up these issues and for us to do our due diligence whether or not we want to do that. As a board member, I would have liked to have seen more compliments to us in terms of what we're doing. You know, I mentioned the $10 billion investment. There's the carbon capturing and natural gas. And one thing I'd be very interested to know would be that where did you get this very impressive statistic about the declining resource of oil? Because again, that's based on projections. Projections are based on probably certain assumptions, certain criteria, but it would have been helpful to indicate, you know, where you got that from. But overall, I thought the quality was good. I thought the quantity was good, and overall, I thought you guys did a good job.
Thank you very much.
So if I could share just a little bit of guidance for your futures. We as the board of ExxonMobil hired you because you're the experts to come in and advise us. And whenever you do a presentation going forward, either in school or when you get into the world of work, you will be the expert on the topic that you're addressing. So keep it simple, keep it factual. So try to keep your presentations focused. Remember who you are. You know more about this topic than anybody that you're speaking to. And you've done a terrific job on your research and presentation skills. So just sort of keep that in mind. You're the experts. They've hired you to educate them. Good job.
And we learned from you today, so thank you for that. You know, you brought forward a lot of concepts that, so any process that you do here is also an education of people. The young set, like yourselves, are more focused on renewable energy than someone at my age. And so it was important for me to listen to you and learn from you today, which I did. So thank you for that. And good luck to you. I thought you did a good job.
And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Just one last note to Dave.
Sure.
The statistics about 47 years and the oil reserves actually comes from BP's 2019 review of like the World Energy Report.
Ooh.
Very good.
Excellent.
I would mention that in your presentation.
Yeah,
I
thank
think
you for
that's-
all the great feedback.